Imagine for a moment your daily commute. Picture the jarring thud of your tires hitting a pothole that's been there since the last administration, the anxiety of crossing a bridge that engineers have officially deemed structurally deficient, or sitting in gridlock traffic on an interstate designed 60 years ago for a fraction of today's volume. Now, blink and transport yourself across the Pacific. You are standing in a gleaming, cavernous railway station that looks more like an interstellar spaceport than a transit hub. You board a train so smooth that a coin balanced on its edge won't fall over as you accelerate to 220 miles per hour, watching the landscape blur past your window as you cross vast mountain ranges on bridges that defy gravity. This isn't a scene from a sci-fi movie set in the year 2050. This is a Tuesday morning in modern China. The stark contrast between these two realities is no longer just a matter of different developmental stages. It has become a glaring, undeniable humiliation for the nation that invented the modern skyscraper and the interstate highway system. We are witnessing a geopolitical reversal of fortune written in concrete and steel, where the former master of engineering is being schooled by a student working at a speed and scale that seems almost incomprehensible to the Western mind. To understand the depth of this current disparity, we must first acknowledge the immense shadow cast by American history. There was a time, not so long ago, when the United States was the undisputed colossus of infrastructure. The 20th century was defined by American audacity. We carved the Panama Canal through jungles, tamed the mighty Colorado River with the Hoover Dam, a structure so massive it actually deformed the Earth's crust, and stitched together an entire continent with President Eisenhower's interstate highway system, the greatest public works project in human history at the time. These weren't just functional projects, they were monuments to democratic capability and industrial might. They signaled to the world that a free society could organize itself to achieve the impossible. That legacy is what makes the current state of affairs so painful to witness. We are living off the interest of our grandparents' investments, driving on roads and utilizing power grids that are well past their intended design lives, while stubbornly refusing to acknowledge that the mantle of world's builder has not just slipped, but has been forcefully seized by another power across the ocean. The narrative shift began quietly in the 1990s, but accelerated with ferocious intensity over the last 15 years. While the U.S. became mired in political gridlock, endless environmental reviews, and debates over funding potholes, China treated infrastructure not as a political football, but as an existential national mandate. They didn't just want to catch up, they intended to leapfrog an entire century of development. The statistics are numbing in their scale. In roughly the same amount of time it took New York City to debate, fund, and partially build the Second Avenue subway extension, a mere handful of miles, China built enough high-speed rail track to circle the equator. This isn't hyperbole. It is a cold, hard measurement of national priorities. The story here isn't just about the volume of concrete poured, it's about the philosophical approach to nation building. For Beijing, infrastructure is the circulatory system of the economy, and they realized that while America's arteries were hardening, they had the opportunity to build a brand new, hyper-efficient body from scratch, utilizing technologies that American engineers dreamed up but could never get funded at home. Let's look closely at the crown jewel of this disparity, high-speed rail. This is where the comparison moves from academic to deeply embarrassing for American travelers. China has constructed, in barely a decade and a half, the world's largest high-speed rail network, spanning over 26,000 miles. It connects virtually every major metropolis in the country. These aren't the rattling commuter trains familiar to Americans. These are pressurized, futuristic bullets gliding on endless ribbons of elevated concrete. A journey that would take 20 painful hours in a car on American roads takes 4 relaxing hours on a Chinese train. Meanwhile, in the United States, the flagship, high-speed, Acela train on the Northeast Corridor rarely reaches its top speed because it's forced to share crumbling, century-old tracks with plodding freight trains and commuter rail. The U.S. has 0 miles of true, dedicated high-speed rail infrastructure comparable to China's standard network. The humiliation lies in the fact that we know how to build it, the technology is accessible, but we lack the political will and systemic efficiency to lay even a single mile of it in the time China lays 1,000. The human impact of this rail network is profound and fundamentally changes how people live and work, creating a level of economic mobility that America has lost. In China, the concept of the commute has been radically redefined. Because of the reliability and speed of these trains, cities that are geographically distant become functionally integrated suburbs. A worker can live in a more affordable, scenic smaller city and commute into a megametropolis like Shanghai or Beijing in less than an hour, door to door. It has decentralized economic opportunity, spreading wealth away from the hyper-congested cores. Compare this to the American experience, where economic opportunity is increasingly hoarded in a few ultra-expensive coastal cities, and the infrastructure connecting them to the heartland is slow, expensive, and unreliable. The average American spends hundreds of hours a year stuck in traffic jams that cost the economy billions in lost productivity, while their Chinese counterpart is utilizing that time to work, rest on a train, or simply get home to their family faster. The infrastructure gap is directly translating into a quality of life gap. Moving from horizontal speed to vertical audacity, we encounter China's bridge-building program, which has literally reshaped the geography of the country's most rugged regions. In the mountainous southwestern provinces, China has waged a war against topography and won. They have constructed the highest and longest bridges on Earth, spanning gorges so deep that clouds often float below the bridge decks. Look at the Beipanjiang Bridge, hanging nearly 2,000 feet above a river. It's an engineering marvel that would be the defining landmark of any Western nation, yet in China, it's just one of many. These aren't vanity projects. They are essential connectors that have pulled isolated, impoverished communities into the modern economy, slashing travel times from days on winding mountain roads to mere hours on smooth asphalt. The sheer technical difficulty of these projects is staggering, requiring new techniques in construction and material science that are setting global standards. The counter-narrative in the United States is a depressing litany of failures and near misses. While China spans gorges that seemed impassable, America watches its iconic bridges rust into obsolescence. The American Society of Civil Engineers consistently gives U.S. infrastructure a near-failing grade. We all remember the I-35W bridge collapse in Minneapolis, a tragic reminder of deferred maintenance. But the real crisis is slower and quieter. It's the tens of thousands of bridges with weight restrictions because they can no longer handle modern loads. It's the iconic bridges in major cities that require netting underneath to catch falling concrete debris so it doesn't hit cars or pedestrians below. The humiliation isn't just that China is building bigger and newer. It's that the richest country on Earth cannot summon the resources to perform basic maintenance on the legacy bequeathed to it by previous generations. The contrast between driving over a sparkling new Chinese suspension bridge and navigating a potholed American overpass held together by patchwork repairs is a visceral reminder of national decline. Then there are the cities themselves. The scale of urbanization in China over the last 30 years is arguably the single greatest transformative event in human history. They haven't just expanded cities. They have conjured entirely new megalopolises out of fishing villages and farmland almost overnight. Shenzhen, once a small town near Hong Kong, is now a sprawling tech hub of over 12 million people, with a skyline that rivals Manhattan, built almost entirely in the last few decades. These cities are designed with integrated transit systems, massive subterranean infrastructure, and verticality that embraces density. They are often criticized for being soulless or repetitive, but their functionality is undeniable. They are machines designed for economic output. China is home to more skyscrapers over 200 meters tall than any other country combined, a visual testament to a construction industry that operates on a 24-hour cycle, fueled by an inexhaustible supply of labor, steel, and capital. Conversely, American cities are largely frozen in time, paralyzed by a combination of well-intentioned but paralyzing NIMBYism, not in my backyard, Byzantine zoning laws, and astronomical construction costs. Trying to build anything substantial in a major U.S. city today is a heroic struggle against bureaucracy. Skyscraper projects that would take 2 years in China take 10 years in New York or San Francisco, often tied up in litigation over shadows, views, or historical preservation of unremarkable buildings. While preserving character is important, the inability to build new housing and infrastructure has created an affordability crisis that is choking the life out of America's most productive regions. The humiliation here is self-inflicted. It is a systemic sclerosis where the rights of individual objectors have completely overwhelmed the needs of the collective good, rendering the construction of transformative urban projects nearly impossible. We look at the skylines of Shanghai or Guangzhou with a mix of awe and defensive cynicism, telling ourselves they are bubbles waiting to burst, perhaps to avoid facing the reality of our own stagnation. Beyond the visible concrete, there is the invisible infrastructure of power. In the race for energy dominance, China is again leaving the U.S. behind, particularly in the crucial technology of ultra-high voltage (UHV) transmission. Think of these as superhighways for electricity. China has built a massive network of these lines that can transport huge amounts of power across thousands of miles with minimal energy loss. This allows them to generate renewable energy in the windy, sunny, uninhabited west of the country and pipe it efficiently to the hungry industrial centers in the east. It is a national grid designed for the 21st century. It provides a level of energy security and efficiency that is a foundational competitive advantage for their manufacturing sector. They are solving the biggest challenge of renewable energy, geography, through brute force engineering infrastructure. The U.S. electrical grid, by comparison, is a fragile patchwork of regional systems, largely built half a century ago for a different era of energy consumption. It is notoriously inefficient at moving power over long distances, stranding renewable energy potential in places like the Midwest because there are no lines to get it to the coasts. We see the consequences of this fragility repeatedly: the catastrophic failure of the Texas grid during a winter freeze, the rolling blackouts in California during heat waves, and the constant vulnerability to cyberattacks and extreme weather. The U.S. talks endlessly about a green energy transition, but seems incapable of building the physical transmission infrastructure necessary to make it a reality. While American politicians debate the existence of climate change, China is building the electrical plumbing required to survive it and dominate the future energy economy. How does this happen? The fundamental difference lies in political will and financing. The Chinese model, for all its authoritarian flaws, possesses an enviable ability to set a long-term strategic goal and ruthlessly execute it over decades, regardless of election cycles. The state controls the land, the banks that finance the projects, and the massive state-owned construction firms that build them. When Beijing decides a high-speed rail line is necessary for national development, it doesn't have to fight 1,000 local lawsuits or wait for fragmented congressional funding. It simply happens. Capital is directed like a fire hose at national priorities. It is a system optimized for speed and scale, willing to accept high debt and displace populations to achieve the macroeconomic goal. The American system, democratic and designed with checks and balances, has curdled into a vetocracy where it is exponentially easier to stop something than to build it. We have layered environmental impact statements upon community review boards upon legal challenges, creating a thicket of red tape so dense that only the most politically connected can navigate it. The cost of building infrastructure in the U.S. is astronomically higher than almost anywhere else in the world, not just because of higher wages, but because of the endless delays, consultants, and legal fees required before a shovel ever hits the ground. We have prioritized process over outcome, and the result is a nation that can no longer afford to build the things it needs to function. The humiliation is realizing that our vaunted democratic processes have become the very shackles holding us back from progress. This ongoing disparity is creating a profound psychological shift. For decades, the world looked to America as the vision of the future. American roads, American airports, American skylines were the global gold standard. Today, an American traveling to Asia often experiences a reverse culture shock upon returning home. Landing at a disruptive, Aging U.S. airport after departing from a gleaming Asian hub like Daxing in Beijing or Incheon in Seoul feels like stepping back in time. This constant visual reinforcement of second-tier status chips away at national confidence. It creates a subconscious feeling that the best days are behind us, that the country is slowly winding down while others are ramping up. It's a Sputnik moment that has lasted for 20 years, yet the sense of urgency remains strangely muted in the general populace. Furthermore, China isn't resting on its laurels. They are already prototyping the next generation of infrastructure, while the US is still debating how to fix the last one. They are aggressively testing maglev, magnetic levitation, trains capable of speeds exceeding 370 miles per hour, speeds that would make domestic air travel obsolete over many distances. They are investing heavily in smart cities, autonomous driving infrastructure, and advanced nuclear power. They are operating on the assumption that infrastructure is a continuous evolution, not a one-time purchase you make and then ignore for 50 years. The humiliation is compounded by the realization that the gap is likely to widen, not shrink, in the coming decade as these new technologies come online. The United States has recently passed major infrastructure legislation, pouring money into the system after years of neglect. But there is a pervasive skepticism about whether this will truly transform the landscape or simply patch the most egregious wounds. Without fundamental reform to the regulatory and permitting processes that make building so slow and expensive, that money may simply evaporate into the bureaucratic ether, resulting in a few repaved roads but no game-changing projects. The scale of investment required to truly modernize America and compete with China is orders of magnitude larger than what has been allocated, and the political will to sustain that effort over decades seems entirely absent in Washington. Ultimately, this isn't just a geopolitical scoreboard comparison. It's a relatable story about the daily friction of life. It's about the parent missing dinner because their commuter train broke down again. It's about the small business owner whose shipping costs are higher because of congested ports and crumbling highways. It's about the nagging sense that things just don't work the way they used to. When a society stops building, it stops dreaming. The energy that used to go into constructing the future turns inward into polarization and nostalgia. The humiliation of America's infrastructure by China's megaprojects is a blaring alarm bell. It is a testament to what happens when a nation loses its focus, becomes complacent in its superiority, and allows its essential systems to decay while a hungry competitor watches, learns, and then surpasses. The gleaming towers and rocketing trains of China are not just feats of engineering, they are a challenge thrown down to the Western world. The question now is not whether America can regain its footing as the world's premier builder. The history is there, but whether it has the humility to admit it has fallen behind, and the discipline to do the hard, decades-long work necessary to catch up. Until then, the future is being built on the other side of the world, and America is watching it happen from the slow lane.